Laken was stolen from us by a savage illegal alien gang member who was arrested while trespassing across Biden's.
Kwauhuru Govan is innocent. They are framing me for my whole cousin murder, saying I can't even accept the law.
Some crimes are shocking and unthinkable, but others are so ruthless and crazy that they leave an entire nation stunned. These cases are far from ordinary. From Richard Allen Davis's monstrous acts to Kwauhuru Govan's chilling crimes, they push the limits of justice, sparking outrage and debate. Let's begin.
Just don't do me like my dad. I have to pay my dues, so should you.
Burn in hell, Davis.
It was supposed to be a fun night. 12-year-old Polly Klaas and her two best friends were having a slumber party at her mother's home in Petaluma, California. But on October 1st, 1993, their innocent sleepover became a nightmare. Around 10:30 p.m., a stranger entered Polly's bedroom, holding a knife. That night would change everything. The man, Richard Allen Davis, was intoxicated when he broke into the house. He had a history of troublesome behavior, including taking things that didn't belong to him and getting into serious trouble. That night, he was once again searching for a chance to cause trouble. He told the girls he wasn't there to hurt them, just to take money. However, his real motive was far more sinister. Instead of leaving, he tied up Polly's two friends, covered their heads with pillowcases, and ordered them to count to 1,000. Then he took Polly and vanished into the night. As soon as Polly's disappearance was reported, a massive search effort began.
The FBI just happened to have the Rapid Start team. It was a relatively new concept with the FBI, where on an investigation with a high volume of information.
Nearly 4,000 volunteers, along with law enforcement and the FBI, worked tirelessly to find her. Flyers were distributed, news stations covered the story, and even celebrities like Winona Ryder offered rewards for Polly's safe return. But weeks passed with no sign of her. 2 months later, police arrested Richard Allen Davis on unrelated charges. During questioning, he made a shocking confession. He had kidnapped Polly. He then led authorities to a shallow grave in Sonoma County where Polly's body was found. She had been strangled to death. His motive was profoundly disturbing. Investigators determined that Davis abducted Polly with harmful intentions, making the crime even more tragic. Davis was charged with Polly's murder and, after a long trial, convicted of first-degree murder with 4 special circumstances: robbery, burglary, kidnapping, and attempted. He was sentenced to death in 1996, but even in his final moments in court, he showed no remorse. After Polly's tragic death, her father, Mark Klaas, became a passionate advocate for child safety, establishing the Polly Klaas Foundation. The case also led to changes in law enforcement communication and played a major role in California's controversial 3 strikes law, designed to keep repeat offenders behind bars. Polly's story is one of deep sorrow, but also one that sparked lasting change. Her memory lives on, not just in the hearts of those who loved her, but in the efforts made to protect children from suffering a similar fate. Our next case is even more tragic, sparking national debate and deeper discussions on justice.
I found her. Ma'am. Oh, I need EMS immediately. She's not breathing.
On a cold February morning, 22-year-old Laken Riley set out for a routine jog near the University of Georgia's intramural fields. It was a simple run, something she had done countless times before. She even sent a quick message to her mother, Allison Phillips. "Good morning, about to go for a run if you're free to talk." But that message would be the last time anyone heard from Laken. As time passed and Laken didn't return, concern grew. Her mother's follow-up message went unanswered. Hours later, her roommates and loved ones realized something was wrong. Authorities were alerted, and soon a large-scale search began. Surveillance footage from campus cameras showed Laken running that morning. However, it also showed something else. 26-year-old Jose Ibarra lurking in the area.
What part of the trail are we on?
This is Millage Avenue Extension as it's coming towards the bus stop.
What time? You said 9:05 a.m.?
Yes.
As investigators pieced together the timeline, disturbing details emerged. Ibarra, an undocumented immigrant from Venezuela, became the prime suspect. DNA evidence matching his was found on Laken's body, and video footage later revealed him disposing of a jacket that contained her DNA in a dumpster. Data from Lakin's Garmin watch helped establish the exact time she was attacked. It was a brutal crime, one that shocked the entire community. The trial moved quickly, with overwhelming evidence against Ibarra. His defense team tried to suggest that the man in the footage might have been his brother, but Special Agent Lucas Bayer testified that there was no proof Diego Ibarra was anywhere near the scene that morning. In the end, the judge found Jose Ibarra guilty on all counts, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Count 1, malice murder. I sentence you to life without the possibility of parole.
As the verdict was read, Lakin's family stood in court, their grief still raw. Her mother, Allison Phillips, spoke with heartbreak and anger. Jose Ibarra took no pity on my scared, panicked, and struggling child. There is no end to the pain and loss we have endured.
Jose Ibarra took no pity on my scared, panicked, and struggling child.
Her stepfather, John Phillips, echoed her sentiments, calling Ibarra a sick, twisted, and evil coward. The case quickly became a focal point for national discussions on immigration reform. Politicians, including former U.S. President Donald Trump and Georgia Governor Brian Kemp, publicly supported the verdict and offered condolences to Lakin's family.
But if we truly care about protecting Americans' children, no step is more crucial than securing America's borders.
The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which played a key role in solving the case, also released a statement expressing their commitment to justice. Laken Riley's life was taken far too soon, but her family fought for justice and won. While no sentence can bring her back, the man responsible for her death will never walk free again. Our next case is pure horror, one where the killer hid in plain sight, right next door.
And you're gonna say you don't know? I know you know.
I don't know.
Yes, you know. What are you gonna say tomorrow when I say we got your hair with the body?
On June 30th, 2011, 27-year-old Lauren Giddings was reported missing. Friends and family were growing worried. She hadn't been seen for days, and her phone calls went unanswered. Lauren had just graduated from Mercer University Law School and was preparing for the bar exam. She had a bright future ahead, but that future was stolen most horrifyingly. What happened to Lauren was beyond anyone's worst nightmare, and the person responsible was closer than anyone realized. Lauren and Stephen McDaniel had been classmates at Mercer Law School. They lived in the same apartment complex, just a few doors apart. On the outside, Stephen seemed quiet, awkward, and harmless, but underneath the facade was something far more sinister. In the early hours of June 26, 2011, while Lauren slept peacefully at her home, Stephen McDaniel carried out his gruesome plan. Wearing gloves and a mask, he used a master key to sneak into her apartment. In the darkness of her bedroom, he attacked, strangling Lauren to death with his bare hands. But the horror didn't stop there. The next day, he returned, dismembering her body with a hacksaw in her bathroom. Most of her remains were thrown into a dumpster on campus, never to be found again. However, he left behind a chilling clue: her torso, dumped in a trash can right outside the apartment. 4 days later, on June 30th, police launched an investigation into Lauren's disappearance. Later that same day, they made a shocking discovery: her torso had been found. The news was devastating. At that moment, McDaniel was being interviewed on camera by a local news station, acting like a concerned friend.
Yeah, Lauren was my neighbor. We're just trying to find out where she is at this point. I mean, no one has seen her since Saturday.
But as soon as the reporter mentioned that a body had been found, his demeanor changed completely. He froze, stumbled over his words, and suddenly claimed he had to leave. That chilling footage later went viral.
You know what I mean? Like, they took out a body there earlier. We don't know if it's the same person or not. Are you okay, sir?
I think I need to sit down.
Okay.
Within hours, police brought him in for questioning. His interrogation lasted more than 12 hours, and eventually, investigators found disturbing evidence in his apartment, including the hacksaw used in the crime. Why did McDaniel do it? The truth was unsettling. Investigators uncovered disturbing videos on his computer, videos of him secretly filming Lauren through her window at night. It was clear that his obsession had escalated into something deadly. He had been watching her, waiting for the right moment. The murder wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. It was planned.
Close friends?
We were good.
I mean, y'all were friends, right? Both
Yes.
of y'all are law students. You're studying to be an attorney, right?
Yes.
In August 2011, Stephen McDaniel was officially charged with murder. Years later, in 2014, he took a plea deal, confessing to the crime to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison with a chance of parole in 2041. However, he smiled at his sentence and remained silent.
District Attorney David Cook, about this plea deal a couple of weeks ago. Cook told me in a news conference that he believes McDaniel will spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Since then, he has made multiple failed attempts to appeal his conviction. Even his father once tried to raise money for legal fees through a GoFundMe page, but it was quickly shut down. Despite all his efforts, McDaniel remains behind bars. Lauren's death was a devastating loss. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend, taken too soon by someone she once considered a classmate. Her story is a chilling reminder that true evil can sometimes be hidden in plain sight. Our next case is even more chilling. This killer wasn't just a one-time murderer, but a relentless serial predator.
That's all I gotta say.
So sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Again, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Deeply sorry for the pain.
Robert Rembert Jr., an Ohio serial killer, murdered at least 5 individuals between 1997 and 2015. In 2018, he received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. On September 21, 2015, Robert Gene Rembert Jr. was pulled over by police outside Cleveland, Ohio. He was driving an SUV that didn't belong to him. It was registered to 26-year-old Morgan Neitzel, who had been found murdered in her home just the day before. As officers dug deeper, they found something even more horrifying. Just hours earlier, Robert's cousin, Jerry Rembert, had also been shot and killed. It seemed like an open and shut case of double homicide, but when investigators ran Robert's DNA, they uncovered something far more disturbing. He wasn't just a killer, he was a serial killer who had been hiding in plain sight for nearly 2 decades. Robert Rembert's history of hostility stretched back to 1997. That year, he got into a heated argument with 24-year-old Deidre Lewis in a parking lot. The fight escalated, and Robert shot him. However, his lawyers convinced the court it was unintentional, and in 1998, he was convicted of manslaughter instead of murder. He served only 6 years in prison before being released in 2004. After his release, Robert lived a seemingly normal life. He worked as a truck driver, but beneath the surface, he was struggling. He had financial troubles, alcohol issues, and nowhere stable to live. His solution? Moving in with his cousin Jerry. But this decision would soon lead to another horrific crime. On September 20th, 2015, Robert got into an argument with Jerry at their home. This time, there was no second chance. Robert pulled out a gun and shot him. That same night, he also killed Morgan Neitzel, a mutual friend of theirs. But Robert didn't just leave their bodies behind. He stole Morgan's car and drove off, thinking he had covered his tracks. His plan failed the next day when police stopped him in Medina County. They quickly connected him to the crime, but what they found next would shock even the most experienced investigators. During routine testing, police ran Robert's DNA through their database. To their surprise, it matched evidence from 2 old cases: Kimberly Hall, a 31-year-old woman found just months earlier, and Rita Mae Payne, a 47-year-old woman murdered in Cleveland. For years, these cases had remained unsolved. No one had suspected Robert, and despite serving time in prison, he had managed to avoid suspicion for almost 20 years. Robert never gave a clear reason for his murders, but there were patterns. He often killed during heated arguments, like in the case of Jerry Rembert and Deidre Lewis. Other times, he targeted vulnerable women, like Kimberly Hall and Rita Mae Payne. Because of his job as a truck driver, police believe he has committed even more murders in cities he frequently visited. Investigators looked into several other missing women who had vanished under similar circumstances, but no additional charges have been filed against him. Yet.
Of the indictment, if this court grants the state's motion to dismiss those specifications, Mr. Rembert will no longer be facing the death penalty, and this will no longer be a capital case.
With overwhelming evidence against him, Robert accepted a plea deal. He confessed to 4 murders, providing details that had never been made public before. On October 16, 2018, he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years.
You now received a copy of your indictment?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you read it?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to waive the 24-hour notice and reading of the indictment and enter a plea of not guilty?
Yes, ma'am.
In court, Robert expressed remorse and asked for forgiveness from the victims' families. But for the families who lost loved ones, no apology could erase the pain he caused.
There's nothing I could possibly say that could change what happened, what I did. All I can say is that I'm sorry. I think you just pray for me. I'm sorry.
Robert Gene Rembert Jr. was a man who blended into society, working ordinary jobs while committing horrific crimes. He had already served time for one killing, yet no one suspected he was a serial murderer. If he had never stolen Morgan Neitzel's car, he might still be free today. He thought he would never get caught, but in the end, one careless mistake exposed his horrifying double life. Our next case remained unsolved for over a decade, until advanced technology finally unmasked a ruthless criminal.
Why they pushing me down?
See you tomorrow.
My ribcage is being bruised by this desk that doesn't move. My chair's being, I can't breathe.
On February 11, 2014, a heartbreaking discovery was made in Bushwick, Brooklyn. The life of 17-year-old Sharabia Thomas was tragically cut short, and her remains were found in an alleyway near 130 Palmetto Street. Authorities later confirmed that she had suffered serious injuries. Despite an extensive investigation, police couldn't identify her killer. With no strong leads and no DNA matches, the case went cold for over a decade. Sharabia's family was left in anguish, hoping for answers that never came.
Investigators were telling me, thank you. They weren't saying why, but they told me that Sharabia Thomas had turned into a significant case.
For years, investigators searched for clues, but the forensic technology at the time was not advanced enough to pinpoint a suspect. DNA collected in 2004 yielded no results, and with no witnesses or significant leads, the case remained unsolved. Sharabia had been a bright and caring young girl with her whole life ahead of her. Her family desperately wanted justice, but it seemed like the person responsible for her brutal murder had gotten away with it. In June 2016, everything changed. The NYPD's Cold Case Squad and the Brooklyn District Attorney's Forensic Science Unit decided to retest old evidence using new DNA technology. They focused on Sharabia's fingernail clippings, which had been preserved since her autopsy. This time, the results revealed a match. Kwauhuru Govan, a former Brooklyn resident who was already in jail for an armed robbery conviction in Florida. But there was something even more chilling about this discovery. When investigators looked further into Govan's past, they found a notebook among his prison belongings. Inside, there were unsettling sketches, including a chair-like device. Authorities later noted similarities between his drawings and the evidence found in Sharabia's case. While the exact motive behind Sharabia's murder remains unclear, investigators believe that Govan had a disturbing pattern of brutality. He lived just 2 blocks away from Sharabia at the time of her death, yet he claimed he had never met her. His sketches and past crimes suggest that he had a history of crime against women. The forensic evidence and crime scene details painted a horrifying picture. Sharabia likely fought for her life, scratching her attacker and leaving behind the DNA that would ultimately expose him. Govan was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. During his trial, he pleaded for leniency, insisting that he was innocent and had been framed. His defense attorney attempted to downplay the DNA evidence, but the jury didn't buy it.
He could face 25 years to life in prison for murder and kidnapping. But Govan left court with the same confidence in his innocence as when he arrived.
The court found him guilty, and he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, the maximum penalty possible. There were no outbursts in court, just a quiet sense of justice finally being served. After years of uncertainty, Sharabia's sisters expressed relief, stating, "Justice is done. We're satisfied with the sentence." While Sharabia's family finally got the justice they had waited for, the case left behind a lingering sense of horror. Authorities believe that Sharabia was not Govan's only victim.
You know, he said, "Ma, if I ever leave, I want to be remembered for great things."
He's currently awaiting trial for the 2005 murder of 19-year-old Rashawn Brazel and remains a suspect in 2 other unsolved cases. His history of hostility suggests that he may have committed multiple crimes before finally being apprehended. Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez summed it up best. Sharabia's bravery when she fought for her life helped bring her killer to justice.
The way I took it, if it wasn't a guaranteed win, then they didn't want to do it.
Even though her life ended in tragedy, her bravery in fighting back provided the crucial evidence that led to her murderer's conviction. This case is a powerful reminder that justice can still be served, even years later, and that cold cases are never truly forgotten. Up next is Daniel Lewis Lee, whose heinous crimes shocked the nation and led to a highly controversial legal battle.
This sentence has done nothing except cause our family more pain and more grief.
On a cold January day in 1996, William Frederick Mueller, a gun dealer from Arkansas, was at home with his wife Nancy and her 8-year-old daughter, Sarah Elizabeth Powell. Unbeknownst to them, 2 men were secretly watching their every move with harmful intentions. These men, Chevy Kehoe and Daniel Lewis Lee, were driven by extremist beliefs and planning to target the family for their valuables. Daniel Lewis Lee had a history of criminal activity. He had been involved in a serious crime years earlier and later became associated with a dangerous extremist group. Alongside Kehoe, he targeted the Mueller family, believing they had money and valuable firearms. Kehoe and Lee traveled from Washington to Arkansas, disguised as law enforcement officers, and waited for the Muellers to return home. Once inside, they restrained William and Nancy before questioning young Sarah about the location of their valuables. They took $50,000 in cash, gold, and valuables from the house, but their crimes didn't stop there. They wanted to leave no trace behind, so they restrained the family and ensured they couldn't call for help. Afterward, they transported the victims 45 miles away to a remote swamp, where they attempted to conceal any evidence of their actions. For his part in the crime, Lee received a few $1,000s and a pistol. The 2 men continued their extremist activities, but justice was already closing in on them. Authorities eventually arrested Kehoe in 1997, and Lee was caught soon after. When the bodies of the Mueller family were discovered, the horrific truth of what had happened to them became clear. Because the murders were part of a larger criminal organization, the case became a federal matter. Prosecutors sought the death penalty for both men. However, in a surprising turn, Kehoe, the mastermind, was sentenced to life in prison. Meanwhile, Daniel Lewis Lee, the accomplice, was sentenced to death. Nancy's mother, Earlene Branch Peterson, has asked U.S. President Donald Trump to grant mercy for Daniel Lewis Lee, who is scheduled to die on December 9th. She also said that executing him would not honor her daughter's memory. Lee spent over 20 years on death row, fighting to have his sentence overturned, but the government was determined to carry it out. After multiple delays, his execution was finally scheduled for July 13, 2020. Just hours before Lee was supposed to be executed, a judge temporarily halted it, citing unresolved legal issues. However, the Supreme Court quickly overturned the ruling, and the execution was set. Lee maintained his innocence, stating, "I didn't do it. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I'm not a murderer. You're killing an innocent man." On July 14, 2020, at 8:07 a.m., Daniel Lewis Lee was put to death by lethal injection. His final words were chilling. "I didn't do it. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I'm not a murderer. You're killing an innocent man." Lee's execution marked the first federal execution in 17 years. Despite protests and legal battles, the government carried out the sentence, bringing an end to one of the most controversial cases in recent history. The case of Daniel Lewis Lee raises many questions about justice and fairness. If he was truly guilty, did he deserve the death penalty while the mastermind behind the crime was spared? And if he was innocent, as he claimed until his last breath, did the justice system fail him?
Move the execution until after it's not a danger to the family, or to drop the charges and lower it to just life without parole.
For the Mueller family's loved ones, the pain of losing them will never fade. But for those who opposed Lee's execution, his death only added another layer of tragedy to an already heartbreaking story. Our next case is even more chilling: a murderer who ruthlessly took the lives of 2 young victims.
Defendant committed 2 truly horrific murders of innocent children. Tayton's death in particular was especially cruel.
On a quiet night in Melrose, Florida, a tragic crime shook an innocent family. Tayton Baker, 14, and his younger brother Robert, 12, lost their lives in their own home. The person responsible, Mark Wilson Jr., someone who was supposed to be a trusted member of their extended family. Tayton and Robert were 2 bright, loving boys with their whole lives ahead of them. They were sleeping peacefully in their home when Wilson, who was dating their aunt at the time, carried out an unimaginable act of violence. He stabbed and bludgeoned both boys, leaving behind a gruesome crime scene. The brutality of the attack was beyond comprehension. Evidence later showed that Tayton fought for his life, desperately trying to escape. When authorities arrived, the scene revealed a heartbreaking struggle. Signs of Tayton's attempt to escape were found, including a handprint on the wall, suggesting he had tried to reach for his phone to call for help. The incident was deeply tragic and devastating for the family. However, as the investigation unfolded, a different picture emerged. Forensic analysis revealed that the crime scene had been staged to mislead authorities, and witness testimonies contradicted Wilson's claims of diminished responsibility. Surveillance footage and digital records placed him at the scene, proving that the act was premeditated. The evidence was undeniable. When the case went to court, Wilson's defense team claimed that he had a difficult childhood and struggled with substance addiction, paranoia, and resentment towards the boy's family. Prosecutors argued that Wilson, influenced by his paranoia, made a devastating choice. Investigators discovered that he had used dangerous objects in the attack, raising concerns about his state of mind at the time. However, the evidence was clear. This was no accident or moment of lost control. It was a deliberate and tragic act. He killed the boys as part of a violent plan to eliminate the entire family. At the time, he was dating their aunt and living in a shed on the family's property. Both he and his girlfriend depended on the boy's mother, Sarah Baker, for financial support, fearing he would be forced out, leading to his deadly actions.
The court finds the factors are proven are sufficient to impose a sentence of death.
Inside the courtroom, emotions ran high. On one side sat the grieving family of Tayton and Robert, their hearts shattered beyond repair. On the other side, Wilson's own family wept as they realized he would not be spared. 7th District State Attorney R.J. Lariza summed it up best. This was a brutal and vicious murder. The defendant showed the victims no mercy, and he didn't get any mercy today. The judge didn't hesitate. Citing the extreme cruelty and premeditation of the murders, he sentenced Wilson to death. The jury had unanimously agreed. This crime deserved the ultimate punishment. For the boy's cousin, Kelly Coco, the verdict was bittersweet. "Nothing will ever bring Tayton and Robert back," she said tearfully. "But this is the best outcome for our family. Now we can try to find a way to move forward." The loss of Tayton and Robert Baker left an unfilled void in their family and community. Their loved ones now hold on to their memories, cherishing the laughter and love the boys brought into their lives. While nothing can erase the pain of losing 2 young lives, justice has been served. The memory of Tayton and Robert will live on. Our next case is about a killer who didn't seek redemption. He turned hospitals into his hunting grounds.
Why is that, Charlie?
Because I injected him with a medication called digoxin.
Hospitals are meant to be places of healing, where doctors and nurses work tirelessly to care for patients. But for over 16 years, one man misused his medical knowledge in a way that brought harm instead of help. Charles Cullen, a nurse in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, murdered his patients in cold blood. He worked in multiple hospitals, slipping through the cracks of the healthcare system, and went undetected for years. By the time he was finally caught in 2003, it was too late. He had already taken dozens, even hundreds of innocent lives. Cullen began his deadly spree in 1988 at St. Barnabas Hospital, where he administered a lethal overdose to a patient. When the hospital staff started investigating strange deaths, he quietly resigned and moved on to another hospital. This pattern repeated itself for years. Each time concerns were raised, he would simply secure employment elsewhere. The absence of thorough background screenings and effective reporting systems in medical facilities enabled him to carry out his actions without detection. His actions were deeply troubling. He administered unauthorized medications that put patients at risk. Many of his victims were elderly or already in critical condition, making their passing seem natural. Even when patients or their families raised concerns, their suspicions were often overlooked. In one chilling incident, a 91-year-old cancer patient at Warren Hospital claimed a sneaky male nurse had injected her with something while she was asleep. She died the next day. Her son protested, but the hospital ignored his concerns. Cullen had passed a lie detector test, so they let him continue working. Even when suspicions arose, hospitals were reluctant to take legal action for fear of lawsuits. It wasn't until he started working at Somerset Medical Center in 2002 that the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Nurse Amy Loughran, one of Cullen's co-workers, grew suspicious of his behavior. She noticed that he accessed the medical records of patients who weren't under his care and requested unnecessary medications. She reported her concerns to the police, and they launched a full-scale investigation.
Well into the hundreds of how many people he not only tried to kill, but probably did murder.
Authorities found that his early life was marked by severe hardship, tragedy, and instability. His father died before his first birthday, and his mother's fatal car crash left him orphaned at 17. Bullied at school and struggling with mental illness, he sought solace in nursing, where his dark urges later emerged. Authorities put Cullen under surveillance and gathered enough evidence to arrest him. On December 12, 2003, when questioned, Cullen admitted to killing at least 40 patients, though experts believe the number could be as high as 400. In 2004, Cullen pleaded guilty to multiple counts of murder and attempted murder. In court, he showed no remorse and even taunted the judge during his sentencing. He was ultimately given 18 consecutive life sentences, making him ineligible for parole until the year 2403. He remains in prison to this day, but instead of saying something, he chooses to remain silent. Cullen claimed he killed patients to end their suffering, but many of his victims were on the path to recovery before he took their lives. He said, "I'm sorry for what I did, but like I said, I don't know if I would have stopped."
Are you sorry what you did?
Yes. But like I said, I don't know if I would have stopped.
His case exposed shocking flaws in the hospital system, prompting new laws in New Jersey and Pennsylvania to improve patient safety and background checks for medical workers. Charles Cullen was supposed to care for his patients, but instead, he became their worst nightmare. The idea that a trusted nurse could turn into a serial killer is horrifying. While Cullen is locked away forever, his case serves as a chilling reminder that even those in positions of trust can hide dark secrets. Our next case is driven by pure anger. A man killed inside a prison.
It's a lot of people that wanted to be here that had to work. This courtroom would have been filled up. You can see it from behind me, the love that my child had.
On the morning of October 21st, 2022, Green Bay Correctional Institution became the scene of a brutal and senseless act of violence. It started as a routine day until Joshua Skolman turned it into a nightmare. Skolman, a 40-year-old inmate, was already serving a 51-year sentence for a tragic drunk driving accident in 2006 that claimed 3 lives. But that morning, tensions escalated. As inmates were released from their cells for medical distribution, Skolman suddenly confronted 25-year-old Timothy Neighbors Jr. using a sharp object he had made from a bed frame. But he wasn't finished. After attacking Neighbors, Skolman then turned his attention to another inmate, 26-year-old Lamont Washington. He chased Washington down the stairwell, attempting to stab him as well. Guards quickly intervened, using pepper spray to subdue him. Prison staff soon realized the extent of the damage. Neighbors had collapsed, bleeding heavily. Despite efforts to save him, he was pronounced brain dead 6 days later. Washington, however, managed to escape with only minor injuries. As investigators looked further into Skolman's background, they uncovered troubling information. Before the incident, Skolman had been under scrutiny for involvement in discriminatory activities. He had written multiple letters expressing interest in joining a prison gang, and as part of their initiation, he was expected to target another inmate.
Our record is obviously incredibly aggravated. It's concerning. The defendant has previously to this case killed 3 people.
A year later, in December 2023, a letter written by Skolman revealed his true motives. He admitted that he did not personally know Neighbors or Washington. He had targeted them based on prejudice. The letter contained discriminatory language and harmful rhetoric. When the case went to trial, Skolman's attorney attempted to argue that he was not guilty due to a mental disease or defect, but the jury didn't believe it. After 4 days of testimony, they found him guilty of first-degree intentional homicide and attempted homicide, both classified as discrimination. On sentencing day, the courtroom was tense. The judge handed down the ultimate punishment, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, Skolman received an extra 15 years for attempted homicide, to be served consecutively. However, he showed no shame for his act and smiled over his sentence. He will never be released. He will never have the chance to harm another person again. And in the end, justice was served. This case was a chilling reminder of the dangers that still exist, even behind bars. It wasn't just an act of violence. This act shattered the family of the victim. Our next case is one of brutal betrayal. A man who took the lives of those who had welcomed him into their home.
Your life is not over. You are breathing air and you are on borrowed time. My dad is dead.
Thomas Knuff was convicted of murdering his longtime friend, John Mann, and Mann's girlfriend, Regina Capobianco, in Ohio in 2017. He was sentenced to death for the brutal killings. In 2017, a quiet neighborhood in Ohio became the backdrop for a horrific crime. It all started with an unusual friendship, one that began behind prison walls. Thomas Knuff, a career criminal, had spent years exchanging letters with Regina Capobianco, a fellow inmate. By 2017, both had been released. Regina had completed her sentence, while Thomas, who had recently been paroled after serving time for aggravated robbery. Regina welcomed Thomas into her home, which she shared with her longtime boyfriend, John Mann. But what started as a simple living arrangement soon turned into a deadly competition for a place to stay. Thomas and Regina quickly realized a serious problem, a roommate dispute. Due to their probation terms, they couldn't live under the same roof. John was forced to choose between them. Thomas tried to solve the issue by offering to pay for Regina to stay in a hotel, but she refused. She had been with John for years and wasn't going to leave her home for someone she barely knew. Arguments turned heated, and then on the night of May 11th, 2017, everything took a tragic turn. Thomas grabbed a knife and attacked Regina, stabbing her 6 times. John tried to stop him, but Thomas turned the knife on him, stabbing him 15 times. Within minutes, both Regina and John lay lifeless in their own home. Thomas wrapped their bodies in blankets, hiding them beneath piles of trash. Then he vanished. At first, Thomas had no plan. He told different stories about how he injured his finger, blaming everything from a bar fight to substance dealers breaking in. But as time passed, he realized he needed to get rid of the evidence. The problem? The bodies started to decompose, and the smell became unbearable. Neighbors complained about the stench.
And we had been looking around the house all this time when they were dead in the house.
When police first checked the house, they assumed the foul odor came from rotting meat left in the kitchen. They threw it away and left without realizing that 2 bodies were still inside. But the smell lingered. Worried, Thomas sat in jail on burglary charges and wrote a letter to a friend, asking them to burn the house down. He even told his girlfriend, Alicia Stoner, a former prison worker who had been fired over their secret relationship, to buy him garbage bags, power tools, and a table saw. He wanted to get rid of the bodies, just like a scene from the TV show Dexter. Luckily, his plan failed. Regina's sister refused to accept her sudden disappearance. When police didn't find anything suspicious during their first search, she decided to take matters into her own hands. On June 21st, 2017, she entered the house. The moment she stepped inside, the overwhelming stench confirmed her worst fears. She called the police. This time, officers searched every inch of the home, and in the bedroom, they found Regina's skull. The truth was finally exposed. He insisted he wasn't responsible, claiming he only killed John in self-defense after witnessing him stab Regina. But the evidence told a different story. The crime scene was described as something out of a horror movie, and Thomas had gone to extreme lengths to hide what he had done. At his sentencing, Judge Dina Calabrese didn't hold back. She said she had never seen someone with so little remorse. The crime was so brutal that she needed Vicks Vapor Rub just to stand inside the house. Thomas Knuff was sentenced to death. However, when Thomas Knuff was arrested, he showed no remorse. Even as he stood before the court, he refused to admit guilt. His last words, "This isn't over." But for the families of Regina and John, justice had finally been served. Up next, Elsa Segura, a woman whose horrifying actions left a community in disbelief. Her case highlights the terrifying extremes some can go, and the shocking details that followed her crime.
Your Honor, the defendant, she actually could have been a hero. She could have been a hero. She could have warned Monique.
On December 31st, 2019, a promising young realtor named Monique Baugh left her home to meet a potential client. She was hardworking, caring, and a loving mother of 2 little girls. However, what began as an ordinary appointment quickly spiraled into a horrifying ordeal that would devastate her family. Monique had been contacted several times by a woman named Elsa Segura, who claimed to be interested in buying a home. What Monique didn't know was that Elsa was setting a deadly trap. When Monique arrived at the vacant property, 2 men, Cedric Berry and Barry Davis, kidnapped her. They tied her up with duct tape and forced her into a moving truck. The nightmare didn't end there. The kidnappers drove to Monique's home in Minneapolis. Using her keys, one of them broke in and shot Monique's boyfriend multiple times in front of their 2 little girls, ages 3 and 1. Despite his serious injuries, he survived and managed to call for help, but Monique was still in danger.
Back in 2019, well, she never showed up to that house. 2 of her boyfriend's friends did, Cedric Berry and Barry Davis. Court documents say they put her into a U-Haul.
About an hour later, Monique was taken to an alley in Minneapolis. There, she was shot 3 times and left alone in the cold. The news of her death devastated her family and friends. She was a beloved mother and a rising star in real estate. The crime was cruel, senseless, and heartbreaking. The investigation quickly uncovered the truth. Elsa Segura had lured Monique into the trap using a burner phone, which was bought by her co-defendant Cedric Berry. The police charged 5 people, including Elsa. Cedric Berry and Barry Davis were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Another accomplice, Shantae Berry, received probation for helping them. Elsa Segura's case went to trial, but in 2022 her conviction was overturned by the Minnesota Supreme Court, leading to a retrial. Rather than face another trial, Elsa chose to plead guilty. On this day, she was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her role in the crime. The judge agreed to a harsher sentence due to the cruelty of the murder and the involvement of multiple people. However, Elsa showed no guilt for her act.
This time asking Judge Peter Cahill to send Elsa Segura to prison for the rest of her life without the possibility of parole. It was Segura who made the phone calls, luring Bao, a local real estate agent.
This case is a painful reminder of how greed and betrayal can lead to tragedy. Monique's family will never get her back, but her memory lives on in the hearts of her loved ones and her 2 daughters. Elsa Segura's sentence holds her accountable, but nothing can erase the pain Monique's family feels.
It's sad that she lost her life for somebody else's decisions in life.
Through it all, the community stands with the Baugh family, hoping they find some peace and justice in the wake of their unimaginable loss. Elsa's story shows how someone she trusted led her into a deadly trap. But as the next case shows, some crimes go beyond recklessness into the realm of calculated violence.
She just isn't a good person. And we miss her.
On August 12, 2016, a heartbreaking crime shook the small community of Afton, Tennessee. The body of 21-year-old Jessie Nicole Morrison was discovered on the side of the road. She had been brutally attacked, and the cause of her death was determined to be blunt force trauma. The tragedy was even greater because Jessie was 4 months pregnant at the time. The investigation started when Gary Ely, who was Jessie's fiancé at the time, lived with her and her 2 sons at the Cross Anchor Trailer Park. On the day of the murder, August 12, 2016, he was at work from 6:30 a.m. until 7:10 p.m., providing a concrete alibi. Additionally, he saw Jessie during his lunch break when she dropped off their shared car and left with Vonda Smith and her 2 sons in Vonda's white Sunfire. Ely was presumed to be the father of Jessie's unborn child. This search for answers left investigators down a path no one expected. As they pieced together the evidence, one name stood out: Vonda Starr Smith, a grandmother from Greene County. The news spread quickly, leaving the community in shock. How could someone known for caring for others be accused of such a horrible crime? Whispers of disbelief filled the town. Neighbors struggled to accept that someone they trusted could be behind such a brutal act. Yet, the evidence pointed directly to Vonda. However, Vonda refused to accept the blame. She insisted she was innocent, claiming the truth had been twisted against her. The courtroom became a battleground, a place where grief, anger, and determination collided. On one side stood the prosecutors, fighting for justice for Jessie and her unborn child. On the other hand, Vonda and her defense team are determined to prove her innocence. Law enforcement worked day and night to uncover the truth. Clue by clue, their investigation led to one person, Vonda Starr Smith. The shocking discovery left everyone in disbelief. Vonda, a grandmother from Greene County, was charged with the murder of Jessie Nicole Morrison and her unborn child. As the trial began, the courtroom was filled with tension. Jessie's family sat with heavy hearts, hoping for justice. However, Vonda was smiling and hugging her son.
Issued an opinion affirming the judgments of the trial court against Smith.
The prosecution prevented the evidence, painting a clear picture of what had happened. Meanwhile, Vonda's defense fought back, but the truth was undeniable. Finally, on May 25, 2018, the jury delivered their verdict, guilty on both charges. The courtroom fell silent as the judge announced Vonda's punishment: life in prison for Jessie's murder and an additional 25 years for the death of Jessie's unborn child. The news brought a bittersweet feeling. Justice had been served, but it could never bring Jessie back. Her family felt the weight of their loss, knowing they would never see her bright smile again.
She is very relieved that the charges has finally come down and that his arrest has been made, and hoping that in the future that justice will be done.
Though the trial ended, Jessie's memory remained alive in the hearts of those who loved her. Her story became a reminder that every life matters and justice will always have its day. Even after her sentencing, the conflict continued. Smith appealed the ruling, claiming the evidence was insufficient and that her rights had been violated during the trial. She argued that the court failed to provide information about a cell phone signal and made errors during the trial. However, on February 24, 2021, the Court of Criminal Appeals at Knoxville upheld the original ruling. Smith's appeal was denied, and her life sentence remained in place. And as the verdict was read, tears started to shed on her face.
Vonda Smith was found guilty in the death of 21-year-old Jessie Morrison, who was pregnant at the time.
The community felt a mixture of sorrow and relief. Jessie and her unborn child were gone far too soon, but justice had been served. This case reminds us of the pain caused by violent crimes and the importance of holding those responsible accountable. Jessie's story will never be forgotten, and her memory will live on in the hearts of those who loved her.
Her kids were alive, and she lost her life for her kids.
Justice was served for Jessie and her unborn child. And in our next case, another act of deception led to a horrifying kidnapping and murder that shook an entire nation.
This is the house.
Yep.
This is the porch. This is the driveway.
Okay.
There's a tree line. The driveway is about this wide.
Okay.
We pulled in. This is the house. This would be the back of the house.
Okay.
So this is the porch right here. There's a house part right here.
On a summer night in 2016, an 18-year-old college baseball player, Colton Thomas Shearer, was spending his break at home in Middleburg, Florida. He had a bright future ahead of him, but everything changed when a robbery turned deadly, ending his life in a moment of violence. Colton had been lured to a house on County Road 16A by someone he thought was a friend, Alexandra Grace Schreffler. Unbeknownst to him, she had been approached by 3 men, Jordan Coleman, Taureen Johnson, and Ozell McNabb Jr., who wanted to find someone to rob. Schreffler chose Colton from her Facebook friends. As the police searched for answers, the heartbreaking truth came to light. Colton had been betrayed by someone he trusted. What started as a meeting between friends quickly turned into a nightmare. The night of the robbery, chaos erupted inside the house. Gunshots echoed through the air, and Colton was critically wounded. His friend, David Cody Levo, was also hurt but managed to escape with another friend, Tyler Bashers. Desperately, they rushed to a nearby gas station for help, but it was too late. Colton's life had already slipped away. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered more crimes linked to the suspects. Coleman, Johnson, and McNabb had also broken into a sheriff's deputy's patrol car, stealing weapons that would cause even more harm. But the law caught up with them. All 4 were arrested, and their plans of greed and violence came to an end. The loss of Colton was devastating, but justice was served for his family. His mother said in court, "I hold you the most responsible for Colton's death. Had it not been for your senseless actions of luring him there that night."
I hold you the most responsible for Colton's death. Had it not been for your senseless actions of luring him there that night.
His story remains a reminder of how precious and fragile life truly is. Justice came slowly, but surely. Schreffler, initially charged with murder and armed robbery, struck a deal. She pleaded guilty to armed robbery and agreed to testify against the others. She received 15 years in prison. Coleman, Johnson, and McNabb faced harsher punishments, with sentences ranging from 25 to 30 years behind bars. However, she showed no remorse.
Schreffler pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of armed robbery and agreed to testify against her co-defendants.
Colton Shearer had dreams, talent, and a life ahead of him, but a senseless act of greed took it all away. His family and friends were left to mourn his loss, knowing his bright future had been stolen. Justice was served, but no sentence could bring peace to Colton's family. His story is a heartbreaking reminder that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. The next case shows how a ruthless car crash takes an innocent life.
He was amazing, smart, intelligent, helpful. He's an amazing young man.
On October 31st, 2018, in Las Vegas, Nevada, a family's life changed forever. A high-speed DUI crash ended the life of 8-year-old Levi Ekshanique and left his parents with severe injuries. The driver responsible for the crash was 25-year-old Aylin Alderette. This heartbreaking case shook the community and became a reminder of the deadly consequences of driving under the influence. Aylin Alderette was driving at 103 miles per hour when she crashed into the Ekshanique family's car at an intersection. Investigators determined that she had been under the influence of alcohol and drugs at the time of the crash. Dashcam and surveillance footage from nearby businesses captured the devastating moment, showing how the impact caused the family's vehicle to spin out of control before coming to a violent stop. Emergency responders arrived at the scene within minutes, but the damage had already been done. Levi was pronounced dead at the hospital, while his parents, Jose and Bridget, suffered life-threatening injuries. The impact was devastating. Levi's brother Joey shared how deeply the loss affected him, saying, "Every time I think about it, I just can't control myself. What she did was not right." The Ekshanique family and their loved ones wore shirts with the words "Justice for Levi, for the love of Levi." as they stood together in the courtroom seeking justice. During the sentencing, Levi's family shared their pain and heartbreak. His mother, Bridget, spoke about her unimaginable loss. She recalled waking up from her injuries, believing her sons were safe at school, only to learn that Levi was gone. She said, "My son was 8 and will never age another day." His father, Jose, expressed his sadness, saying, "She stole my baby boy that I will never see again. Her family can still visit her. My baby boy was 8.
Unfortunately, it was my vehicle that she hit. She stole my baby boy. I can never see again.
Alderette sobbed through the hearing, apologizing to the family. She said, "I'm so sorry for the family I hurt. I wish I could return to that horrific day and change everything." Her defense attorney shared that she had faced a difficult life, suffering from mental illness and trauma, but the prosecutor argued that her actions still required accountability. The judge sentenced Aylin Alderette to 26 to 65 years in prison, the maximum sentence for a second-degree murder and 2 counts of DUI causing substantial bodily harm. She was also ordered to pay the family $467,000 in restitution. At the time of sentencing, she breaks down in court after hearing her sentence.
Levi was killed after Aylin Alderette drove with 4 times the legal limit of marijuana in her system and smashed into the Echenique's car.
Levi's older brother Joey said that giving her the maximum sentence was the best birthday present my brother could get. Levi would have turned 9 years old just days after the sentencing.
Every time I think about it, I just can't control myself. What she did was not right at all. Like my mom said, the best birthday present that my brother could get.
This case reminds us of how one reckless decision can cause irreversible pain. Levi's family will forever carry the heartbreak of losing their beloved son and brother. Although the sentence cannot bring Levi back, his family found some peace knowing that justice was served. The tragedy stands as a powerful reminder to never drive under the influence and to always consider the safety of others.
Levi's parents say the outpouring of support from the community is a testament to the kind of kid Levi was.
Levi's loss is a stark reminder of how one thoughtless action can destroy lives. However, in the next case, the victim survived the attack, but the physical and emotional scars will never fully heal.
Did you ever tell Jessica that you were pregnant?
Yes, sir. My sister was on top of me, covering my mouth, trying to choke me.
On October 6, 2013, a shocking act of violence shattered a family in Malani Maka when Jessie Heinbaugh and her boyfriend Michael Ayala betrayed someone they should have protected, Jessica's sister, Casey Ann Jones. Casey, who was 2 months pregnant, endured a terrifying attack at the hands of the very people she should have been able to trust the most. The brutal betrayal by her sister and Ayala turned what should have been a bond of love and protection into a horrifying ordeal that would leave lasting scars. That day, Jessica and Michael choked and stabbed Casey, leaving her with serious injuries. However, the physical pain was only part of her suffering. Her greatest fear was for her unborn baby's life. The police launched an immediate investigation, gathering evidence from the crime scene, which included blood-stained items and a kitchen knife identified as the weapon used in the attack. Investigators also obtained surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera, which captured Michael Ayala arriving and leaving the scene. During police interviews, Casey provided a harrowing account of the attack, describing how Jessica and Michael showed no mercy. Medical reports confirmed multiple stab wounds and bruising consistent with strangulation, supporting Casey's testimony. Authorities charged Jessica Heinbaugh and Michael Ayala with attempted murder, citing clear intent to kill. Prosecutors argued that the brutality of the attack, along with Casey's vulnerable state due to her pregnancy, proved premeditation. The case went to trial, and Jessica did not deny what she had done. She laughs at the time of trial. Her public defender, Darcia Forrester, shared that Jessica had fully accepted her guilt and the punishment that awaited her. She knew there would be no escaping the consequences of her actions, but for Casey, the wounds ran deeper than what anyone could see. The attack stole her peace and happiness during a time that should have been filled with joy and excitement, dreaming about her baby's future. No matter what happened in court, Casey's life would never be the same. During the sentencing, a powerful letter from Casey Ann Jones was read aloud in court. In her heartfelt words, she shared how the attack forever changed her life. It didn't just leave her with physical scars, it stole her peace, her trust, and the joy she had felt about becoming a mother. Casey wrote about how instead of celebrating her pregnancy, she spent her days in fear. She no longer felt safe in her own home. Simple things like locking doors or making sure every knife was in place became part of her daily routine as she tried to protect herself and her unborn child. Through her letter, Casey made it clear that the damage went beyond her injuries. It was something she carried in her heart every day. She wanted the court to know that the actions of Jessica and Michael had taken far more from her than anyone could see.
How did this talk make you feel?
Horrified. I was being attacked by someone I loved and trusted.
She wrote that her daughter suffered the most, growing up in the shadow of an unimaginable crime. She would never meet the people who had caused so much pain, but their actions had forever changed her life. Casey begged the court to ensure that Jessica and Michael never had the chance to harm anyone else again. On Tuesday, Jessica Heinbaugh was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. However, she had no shame for her act. Michael Ayala's sentencing would follow later. For Casey, justice had been served, but the scars of that night would never fully fade. Up next, Catherine Knight, a case so gruesome it shocked even the most hardened investigators. Her crimes pushed the limits of brutality, leaving a lasting mark on true crime history.
1st of March 2000 is etched on the minds of the people of Aberdeen, Australia, forever.
Never before, and really never again, has there been a crime of this nature actually perpetrated by a woman.
A murder so inexplicably heinous, it still affects all of the officers called to the scene to this day.
Nothing could prepare you for what you were about to see.
Aberdeen, New South Wales, a quiet town where crime was rare. But on the 1st of March 2000, a crime so unimaginable unfolded that it would send shockwaves across Australia. When John Price didn't show up for work, his concerned co-workers called the police. Officers arrived at his home, knocking repeatedly. No answer. But what they saw through the window was enough to force entry. Inside, they walked straight into a horror scene straight out of a nightmare. John Price had been in a harmful relationship with Catherine Knight for years. A butcher by trade, a violent woman by nature, Catherine had a deep fascination with knives, violence, and control. Her past relationships were marked with threats, physical harm, and disturbing behavior. In one case, she had held a previous partner at knife point, demanding he take her back. In another, she slit the throat of his puppy as a warning. When Price finally tried to escape her grasp, filing a restraining order after one of her outbursts, he told friends that if he ever went missing, Knight was to blame. Sadly, he was right. On the night of February 29, 2000, Knight arrived at Price's home under the guise of reconciliation. What happened next was pure horror. She waited until he fell asleep, then launched her sadistic attack. Using a butcher knife, Knight stabbed Price 37 times. Deep, savage blows piercing vital organs. The sheer force of the attack sent blood spattering across the walls. But her twisted desires weren't satisfied. With chilling precision, she skinned his entire body, hung the flesh from a meat hook in the living room, and cooked parts of his body. She set 2 plates on the table, each labeled with the names of Price's children, suggesting she planned to feed them their father. It was so gruesome that hardened investigators needed therapy after witnessing the scene. Knight was found in a drugged state, having taken a handful of pills, likely attempting to stage a fake suicide. She was arrested immediately. During questioning, she claimed she remembered nothing, but the evidence was undeniable. Her trial was one of Australia's most infamous, with zero possibility of parole. The judge, horrified by the details, declared she was too dangerous to ever be freed. She became the first woman in Australian history sentenced to life without parole. In court, Knight showed no emotion, no tears, no remorse, just a chilling blank stare as the crime was laid out in harrowing detail. The family of John Price sat in shock and horror, forced to relive the unimaginable pain of his final moments. While justice was swift, the trauma Knight left behind would never fade. Even behind bars, Knight remains a terrifying enigma. A woman so devoid of empathy that even hardened criminals fear her. She will die in prison, and the world is better off for it. Our next case takes us to the ruthless world of organized crime, where one woman rose to power through murder and cold-blooded executions. But what made her even more terrifying? She didn't even spare her own allies.
She was the largest cocaine importer at the time.
Known in cities across the US as the Godmother, for her mafia-like brutality. Gangland warfare has been raging across the city for 3 years.
Miami saw dramatic changes in the homicide rate. We went from probably 80 to 100 murders a year to almost 300 to 400.
In the heart of 1970s Miami, where money flowed like water and violence ruled the streets, one name sent chills through even the most hardened criminals: Griselda Blanco. She wasn't just a lord, she was the queen of retribution, eliminating anyone who stood in her way with ruthless efficiency. But her reign of terror didn't stop at business rivals. Even those closest to her weren't safe. By the time her empire crumbled, Blanco was linked to over 200 murders, including her own husband's, earning her the chilling nickname, the Black Widow. Blanco's criminal roots ran deep. She began her life of crime as a child in Colombia, running scams and kidnappings before diving headfirst into the trade. When she arrived in the US, she quickly dominated Miami's substance market, pioneering new smuggling methods and raking in millions per month. But with power came paranoia. Blanco trusted no one. She ran her operation with an iron fist, ordering brutal executions without hesitation. Drive-by shootings, assassinations in broad daylight. Miami's streets became a war zone under her rule, and law enforcement had had enough. The FBI launched Operation Banshee, an all-out effort to bring Blanco down. In 1985, their patience paid off. Agents arrested Blanco in California, charging her with 3 counts of first-degree murder. But even behind bars, her influence lingered. Authorities feared she was still orchestrating hits from her prison cell. And then came the most shocking twist. While she was serving time, prosecutors discovered evidence linking her to a dozen more killings, including a contract to murder a child over an unpaid drug debt. Despite the mountain of evidence, Blanco struck a plea deal, escaping the death penalty and serving only 7 years before being deported to Colombia. But karma wasn't done with her yet. In 2012, as she left a butcher shop in Medellin, a motorcycle assassin gunned her down, the same execution style she had used on so many of her own enemies. Griselda Blanco's legacy remains one of blood and fear. She wasn't just another cartel boss. She redefined the drug trade, proving that a woman could be just as lethal as any man in the underworld. And yet, in the end, she fell victim to the same world she created. Her story serves as a terrifying reminder that in the world of crime, loyalty is fleeting, and power always comes at a price. Our next case takes us into the twisted world of a woman who played a deadly game of deception. Her charm was a weapon, and her victims never saw the danger until it was too late. This is the story of Sheila Davalloo.
Answer, please. Hello. A guy is attacked my neighbor. You think someone attacked your neighbor? Yes. I heard yelling.
In 2002, a quiet Connecticut neighborhood became the setting for a twisted love triangle that would end in obsession, betrayal, and murder. Sheila Davalloo seemed like an ordinary, intelligent woman, until her deadly fixation on another man led to 2 violent attacks that no one saw coming. Sheila was married, but she had a dangerous obsession with her coworker, Nelson Sessler. The problem? He was already in a relationship with Ana Lisa Raimondo, and Sheila couldn't stand being second choice. For months, she carefully manipulated the situation, trying to sabotage Nelson's relationship. She called Ana Lisa's home, pretended to be other women, and planted rumors at work. But none of it was enough. Nelson remained committed to Ana Lisa. That's when Sheila decided to eliminate her competition.
It was a crime triggered by a lover's obsession, and it drove the police down a rabbit hole of dead ends and one big, strange twist.
On November 8, 2002, Ana Lisa was found brutally murdered in her Stamford condo. She had been stabbed multiple times and beaten, her home ransacked to make it look like a robbery. There were no immediate suspects, and the case quickly went cold. Sheila, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened, continuing her affair with Nelson, while still keeping her husband in the dark. But Sheila's thirst for control didn't stop at Ana Lisa. A year later, in 2003, she turned on her own husband. Sheila convinced Paul Christos to play a blindfolded game, then suddenly stabbed him twice in the chest. He barely survived, escaping and calling 911. While paramedics rushed to save him, Sheila made a shocking move. She called Nelson, not 911, as her husband bled out. That mistake exposed everything. Sheila was arrested for the attack on Paul and sentenced to 25 years, but as investigators dug deeper, they linked her to Ana Lisa's murder. DNA evidence, phone records, and her history of jealousy sealed her fate. In 2012, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison.
I'm claiming my innocence.
Not if Sheila Davalu had her way.
But this is a case where I am being accused of killing somebody.
Sheila never showed remorse for her crimes. Even in court, she appeared cold and detached, refusing to take responsibility. Her story remains one of the most chilling cases of obsession turning deadly, where love, jealousy, and deception ended in bloodshed. And the scariest part, if her husband hadn't survived, she might have gotten away with it all. Our next case takes us to a seemingly caring nurse who was trusted with the lives of innocent children. But behind closed doors, she became a silent killer. When authorities uncovered what she had done, it left the entire medical community in shock.
Beverly Allett, a nurse whose mission to kill the youngest and most helpless patients in her care left a nation horrified.
With all eyes anxious for a glimpse of Britain's worst female serial killer,
the former nurse Beverly Allett begins a sentence without end tonight for murdering 4 children in her care and for injuring 9 others. She was given life 13 times over and was told there was no real chance of her ever being free again.
In the early 1900s, Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in England became the center of a terrifying mystery. Babies and young children, previously stable, began suffering sudden, unexplained medical emergencies. Some recovered, but others tragically didn't make it. Doctors were baffled, parents were heartbroken, and no one suspected the friendly pediatric nurse who was always at their bedside, Beverly Allett. Allett presented herself as a dedicated, caring nurse. She consoled grieving parents, reassured doctors, and seemed to be deeply invested in the well-being of her patients. But behind this facade, she was systematically targeting innocent children, injecting them with lethal doses of insulin and potassium, or suffocating them. Between February and April 1991, she attacked 13 children, killing 4 and leaving others permanently disabled. Yet, no one realized what was happening until the pattern emerged. As investigators pieced together the cases, they noticed an unsettling trend. Beverly Allett was present for every single emergency. The hospital launched an internal investigation, uncovering missing medical records and evidence of tampering. Suspicion quickly turned towards Allett, and when forensic testing confirmed that several victims had been deliberately poisoned, she was arrested.
Last night, 23-year-old Beverly Gail Allett of Grantham, a former nurse at the Grantham and Kesteven Hospital, was charged with 4 counts of murder, 8 counts of attempted murder, and 8 counts of causing grievous bodily harm. In the course of all of the interviews, she maintained her innocence.
Her trial revealed the full horror of her crimes. She had preyed on the most vulnerable, all while pretending to be their protector. The court heard chilling details of her calculated attacks and how she thrived on the chaos and attention they brought. In 1993, Beverly Allett was sentenced to 13 life terms for her crimes, making her one of the worst child killers in British history. She was diagnosed with Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder where caregivers harm others to gain sympathy and attention. Instead of prison, she was sent to Rampton Secure Hospital, a psychiatric facility where she remains to this day. Families were left devastated. Parents who had trusted her now had to live with the unbearable truth that the person meant to save their children was the one who took them away. Allett has never shown true remorse. Even now, as she serves her sentence, there are fears she could one day be released, sparking outrage from the victims' families. She was supposed to heal the sick. Instead, she became one of the most notorious medical killers of all time. Our next case takes us to a woman whose ruthless ambition led her to orchestrate a cold-blooded execution. She didn't act alone. She pulled the strings from behind the scenes, manipulating others to do her dirty work. But when the truth unraveled, her fate was sealed.
And if Christy can hear me, if you can get away someplace, Christy, phone either home or the Niagara Police as soon as possible.
Is wanted for a series of assaults, 2 last May and 1 just last week. And police say his attacks always follow the same pattern.
In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Canada was gripped by fear as young women were vanishing, only to be found murdered. At the center of it all was Paul Bernardo, a man later exposed as the Scarborough rapist. But he wasn't working alone. His partner in crime? A woman who shocked the world with her cold-hearted participation, Karla Homolka. Karla wasn't just an unwilling accomplice. She was an active participant in the horrific assaults and murders of multiple victims, including her own younger sister, Tammy Homolka. What made this case even more disturbing was how she played the role of the perfect girlfriend and later, the devoted wife. Behind closed doors, she helped lure victims, cover up crimes, and manipulate those around her. By the time the authorities started connecting Bernardo to the violent crimes, Carla crafted an escape plan. She painted herself as a battered woman, claiming she had been a victim of Paul's mistreatment and had no choice but to comply. In 1993, Carla struck a plea deal, known as the Deal with the Devil, where she agreed to testify against Bernardo in exchange for a 12-year sentence for manslaughter. At the time, prosecutors believed her story, but everything changed when new videotapes surfaced. These tapes proved that Carla wasn't a victim. She was a willing participant. They showed her laughing and enjoying the harm inflicted on their victims, but it was too late. Her plea deal couldn't be overturned. Paul Bernardo was sentenced to life in prison without parole, but Carla walked free in 2005 after serving her full 12-year sentence. She changed her name, moved, and even started a family, attempting to erase her past. But the public never forgot what she had done. Her attempts to blend into normal life only led to public outrage whenever her whereabouts were discovered. Karla Homolka's early release remains one of Canada's most controversial legal decisions. Victims' families, along with the public, felt betrayed by the justice system. How could someone so involved in such horrifying crimes be allowed to walk free? Even today, she lives under a cloud of suspicion, with many believing she never truly paid for her crimes. Her case serves as a terrifying reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people don't look like killers, but they are. These cases are a chilling reminder that justice is not always swift, but when it arrives, it can bring closure to victims' families and ensure that dangerous individuals never harm again. But there's more to uncover. In our next video on screen, we'll dive deeper into more haunting cases and sentences that expose the darkest depths of human nature.